And especially you hear some crazy cases about some people whose fathers, who they don't have an interaction or any type of relationship with, were pastors. And it's like, they run the opposite way from the faith because it's so many stories you hear, especially in the church. And it's unfortunate because I've learned, and as an adult, like all churches are not the same. Like I don't believe all police are the same. That might get you crucified in this world today. You'd be like, I don't think every cop is bad. Actually, me personally, I've had better experiences with cops in person in real life than what society has shown. Like, what's up, y'all? So, look, let me just go ahead and keep it short with you. Did you know that as of 2024, the United States has a literacy problem? 21% of adults cannot read, and 54% of them have been recorded, and it has been documented read below a sixth grade level. That is a catastrophe. But that's where I step in. Now, I'm not going to teach the grown folks how to read and write. However, PSA, the Ghostwriting Solution, has now a new package. It's called the Literacy Liftoff, and it caters to 9th through 12th graders who struggle with reading, writing, and comprehension. This new tutoring service will offer vocabulary skills, teaching students how to literally write from the bottom, literally teaching them how to do an introduction paragraph, how to do a hook, how to do a conclusion, how to add a little razzle dazzle, and how to add their own personal touch to it. Okay. Now, what you're saying. Well, that's what they go to school for. Absolutely. But as an ex-teacher, the teachers just don't have time. So this program has 3 different packages from 3 different sets of hours that you can take. So if you're an AP, a principal, the student who needs help, the parent of the student, or you just know somebody who needs the help. If you're in the Houston area, you can get in-person tutorials. But if you are not in Houston, there are also virtual options offered as well. So hit me up at my email, theprodigyperspective@gmail.com, and or psathepodcast.com, and we will hook you up. All right. What's up, y'all? It is another week, another podcast. We are in the month of June, which we all know is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. In case you didn't know, if I'm the first to tell you, here we are. Got a great episode today. This month has been doing good. Hopefully, y'all been tapping into the Instagram, PSA, the Mental Health Podcast on Instagram, because I've been doing something every day. And I've been posting stuff on LinkedIn and Facebook too. Getting into my bag as your favorite mental health ghostwriter. I don't know anybody else that goes by that title. I think I created something. They said Gunner was 101, but I'm really 101. All right, y'all. So today's episode is going to be great for the fact of, since it's Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I got a bunch of episodes in the files. I felt like this one we needed to talk about during this month, because this is the real pandemic. Okay, this is the real epidemic. All right, so let me get into this week's meme. The meme reads, "You can tell who didn't have a father." All right, so we can already tell what type of time I'm on today. Inspirations for this episode actually comes from a video Brett Cooper did, and I'm gonna recap what part. It was a video I watched a long time ago, and she talked about a topic that dealt with fathers, and she talked about it a few times, but it's one in particular I'm going to bring up later, and I can't wait to hear y'all take on it. Also, in the past episode I did on the soft guy era, the new trend that's been going on, it was going on for a while. It was a comment made that actually got me some flack on TikTok. And the comment I made was, basically I said, these women have an impression of what men should do, how men should do things, and all that. And my stance, or my view on that was, how do you know what a man should do if you didn't have a father? Can't get the word out. This is also aligns with other men who didn't have a father as well. And so somebody on TikTok said that's a bad example, because just because you have a father doesn't mean that he was a good one. So that really don't make sense. I said, you're missing the point of what I'm saying. And I was also basically stating that the studies and statistics have shown that even just having a father eliminates certain issues that were present in general. So I'm not saying, okay, at least I got one and he's bad. But all of what I'm saying is to that statement is, how do you know what a man should and shouldn't do if you didn't have a father figure? That's the angle I was going from. And I said in the clip, I said, well, did you learn it from YouTube? Did you read a book on it? Because how do you know? And I was just asking a question. And of course, people got offended. And then another inspiration for today, Ephesians 6:4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. All right, y'all. So now let's get into my favorite topic today, where I can kind of rant, and that is happy hour. Okay, so for today's happy hour, I'm simply talking about one thing, and this is just a suggestion. So, you know, you go to restaurants and they always will say, donate. You know, hey, do you want to round up your meal to donate to this fund or these children here? And usually I say no. But one day they had asked me, I was at a Popeyes, and the Popeyes had people that looked like this. And they was like, hey, bro, you mind donating to the fund? And I said, you know what? Why not? So I decided to do it. They ring the bell and they said, we finna hook you up. And they looked at me just like that. So they went to the back. When I tell y'all, these black folks, they gave me, it felt like every wing in the place. I had extra biscuits, extra fries. They drowned the wings in the sauce that they made. And I said, all this because I donated, I went through extra $1. So I got the wings and the fries, and that was great, right? So I said, I'm going to try this again. And I went to a place that was full of people that were non-POC and did the same thing. And guess what? They did the exact same thing. So my tips to anybody today is, when you see that thing that says donate to the people, don't do it. Because I thought it was just like, oh, you know, just a bunch of BS. They be hooking your stuff up. Because I had never seen that before. They really was hooking up their stuff, I guess, because they got a quota they got to meet or something. I don't know. But they hooked my stuff up. But the Bible said give to the poor too. So there's that. So keep that in mind if you ever, you know, question that. But enough of my rant today. We have a lot to talk about. Fatherlessness is big. And I have a great guest today, somebody who's killing it all over with their interviews. They got a lot of insight. I'm going to pick their brain about this topic while still interviewing them at the same time. I don't know too many people that can do that, but I can do it. So let me go ahead and introduce my guest today. What is going on?
What's going on, Izzy? How you been?
I'm good. It's currently raining cats and dogs in Houston. I pray we don't have another tornado, but here I am. So obviously my YouTube people can see you, but for my audio only people, can you tell the people what's your name, where you from, and where do you live?
Yeah, so my name is Philip Blackett, originally from Memphis, Tennessee, so Southerner at heart, not too far from Texas, and currently living and doing this broadcast from Boston.
Okay, Boston. What made you go to Boston? I still haven't been there yet.
So I came up here about 10 years ago, was going back to school, getting my degree in business, and so that's what brought me here originally. Found my wife up here while studying, got married the day after graduation, had kids, 2 kids afterwards, and that's what's kept us up here up to this point.
Okay. So now you got a lot of transitioning going on. So that's good for you. Now, I want to ask you, can you share your personal experiences with fatherhood and how it has shaped your views on the importance of father figures in the family?
Sure, let's get into it. Um, so I think first things first for me, we all have fathers. We wouldn't be here without a father and a mother contributing. Um, However, the level of engagement we have as far as fathers in our lives, that can differ once we come into the world. And so for me, I've had basically an on and off relationship with my father since growing up. He wasn't really active or present in my life during the time when I was growing up, as far as like leading up to high school and graduation at 18. And I think even now, things are being full circle with me being a father and a husband now. Um, we don't really talk much either here for a number of reasons, and I'll respect my dad enough not to get into those type of reasons. It's part of my way of honoring him, even though we don't see eye to eye on a number of things. Um, but at least to answer your question, Izzy, yeah, um, my experience or lack thereof experience as far as fatherhood growing up has definitely colored the way I look at things as far as why fatherlessness is what I would argue the biggest epidemic that we're not talking about.
Great. I like that play of words. So now we're gonna jump back into fatherlessness in a hot second. But tell the people what it is that you currently do for work.
Yeah, so outside of raising my family, I've written a number of books. Recently, I published 6 books this year. I think I'm good for now, but
Mm,
just really teaching about what I've written about, speaking, but also doing the consulting work with regards to helping small businesses to grow their businesses as far as grow their sales, their profits, exit value through what I call dream business makeovers that are powered by artificial intelligence. So that's essentially what's on my plate. Definitely a full plate to be exact, but that's what I do.
okay. So now we live in a world where AI has started to take over. Some people say we should run from it. Some people say we should partner with it. As me, who have my own ghostwriting service and a writer, I look at AI as I said, it's like Batman, and then I'm Batman, and then the AI is the utility belt. Like the utility belt can't do it on its own, but if you partner with it and use it correctly, you can fly, go across the buildings, you can take down enemies, you can do a bunch of different things. So, what is your take, or what would you say about AI that maybe 2 or 3 things you say about AI that is positive, or what we should embrace versus run from?
Sure. So first things first, AI is here to stay. It's not a fad. Two, AI, artificial intelligence, is essentially this generation's social media. It's personal computer, it's typewriter, it's steam engine, automobile, electricity, wheel. Basically, it's a new technology that will significantly increase the way we go about our lives. It's here to serve us, it's here to help us be more productive. Um, the primary question we have, though, is are we going to actually take the time to learn it, figure out how to adapt and include it in what we do? Or are we going to have it as something thinking it's a fad, falsely speaking, uh, and run the risk of potentially being replaced by those that use it?
Okay. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Now, before we go into my next segment, I have to ask, why is fatherlessness the biggest problem in our society today?
Perfect question. Izzy, let me answer that question with another question. Um, Izzy, how would you define yourself as far as who Izzy is without a father?
I couldn't even tell you because I have one. So I couldn't even tell you.
So it's hard for you to kind of figure out who you are without knowing where you came from, right?
Right.
Right. So I look at it in the sense is like, your parents are the first thing you go towards as far as trying to figure out who you are, right? You literally came from them. So that's going to be your first source to figure out who you are, what makes you who you are, how you interact with other people, what's your purpose, and where do I go from here? So if you have half of that equation missing, you got to figure out how to fill that void.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, especially when you get involved with school and other life encounters where you see people with fathers, you're never really going to ask yourself the question, where's mine?
Right.
So, as a young kid, that is a question that is a tough question that any kid has to ask him or herself, let alone go to mom or someone in the family to ask, who is my father? Where is he? Why is he not present? Why is he not loving me the way you are? So, already you're finding yourself behind the 8 ball trying to figure out this question that a lot of other kids don't have to figure out. On top of that, that void that you're experiencing, more than likely you're going to try to figure out how to fill it, if not by him, by other alternatives. And by other alternatives, I mean alternatives that could potentially be unhealthy and dangerous. Quick example would be joining a gang. because you want to be with other male figures, and you have a common ground, maybe that you don't have fathers in the household, so you're going to band together and stick up for one another. It may involve you in some suspicious, potentially illegal activities that could be dangerous to people and yourself, but you're looking for that sense of family, that sense of other males in your life to learn from, because at some point you have to also understand your mother can only teach you so much, as far as in this situation, how to be a man. Another example would be a father's love being missing for a man or a woman growing up. You might look for that sort of love elsewhere. That might be the wrong type of love, as in being involved in sexual relationships with someone of the opposite sex, or the same sex for that matter, that puts you in harm's way potentially, as far as with promiscuity, runs the risk of STDs, maybe unwanted pregnancies that you decide either to keep or not to keep, but also in the sense of just common over and over relationships with people that may not last, that further complicates and compounds the situation of what you've been trying to solve, that's been missing as far as a father's love, but you still coming across something that's faulty, that's not suiting what you're trying to get in the first place. Right. So those are two quick examples. But basically what happens is essentially you're trying to figure out who you are, and half of that equation is missing, and it leads you down a pathway potentially that could be dangerous with you trying to fill that void elsewhere.
Good stuff. All right. So that leads. That's a great segue to the next segment, which is, what does this have to do with mental health? So before we get into that, I have another personal question. So this podcast is geared towards decision making. So you have advanced degrees. I saw you got degrees in divinity and business from prestigious institutions. So how do you integrate the principles of faith and business in your everyday decision making and leadership?
Once again, this kind of brings in as far as who you are and what's important to you. And so I think, to answer your question, Izzy, faith is first and foremost a significant part of who I am.
Yeah.
Right. Even in a sense where my father was not around much growing up, I had to lean less on who my earthly father is and more on who my heavenly father is. Right. And so that was essentially helping fill the void for me, to get a strong sense and foundation of who I am, and bringing that whole self, that whole authentic self, people like to say nowadays, into the business world, into different jobs or different classrooms or different settings, where you're essentially using that as your frame of reference to understand what's right and wrong, and how to basically conduct yourself while working with others.
Okay. So I like that, because a lot of times that does happen, but we're leaning onto your heavenly father, but a lot of times it doesn't. It's like they go the opposite way. And especially you hear some crazy cases about some people whose fathers, who they don't have an interaction or any type of relationship with, were pastors. And it's like, they run the opposite way from the faith, because it's so many stories you hear, especially in the church. And it's unfortunate, because I've learned, and as an adult, like, all churches are not the same. Like, I don't believe all police are the same. That might get you crucified in this world today. You'd be like, I don't think every cop is bad. Actually, me personally, I've had better experiences with cops in person in real life than what society has shown. Like, so it's unfortunate that when society pushes a narrative, everyone takes it and runs with it. So in your opinion, how do you think, of course, we've already spoken about, you not knowing who you are, as far as half of you kind of go around, you join gangs, you may end up in promiscuity on men, which is bad for men and women, even though they make it seem like it's just bad for women. It's really bad for both of us. If I'll get somebody on this podcast when they talking about soul ties, but we ain't gonna get into that today. But how do you think that we know it leads them to make bad decisions, but why do you think that when it comes to making these life decisions, they are led to make decisions that aren't the best? Like, what do you think is like the triggers? I think is like, maybe it's like oh, I want to make this decision to maybe I want attention because I don't have a father? Do you think it's like maybe my dad did this, I don't know him, but he did this, so I want to be like him? What do you think that is?
Well, essentially, somebody stepping in that role of father for everybody, one way or the other, right? We're all learning from somebody. We're as kids, we're all paying attention to the world around us, as far as the older kids, the adults that we see right in front of us, as a barometer on how we should act,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you come across a 5-year-old cursing out an adult, just understand that kid did not come out the womb cursing somebody out. That kid learned it from somebody, and they thought that that was the way to go about it. So it's almost in a sense with these type of life decisions that could be crucial for people and can have a long-standing effect on how their lives would be going forward. We're learning from somebody or something on how to go about it. And oftentimes now, especially with social media and TV and the internet and that sort of thing too, we're exposed to a vast number of quote unquote influencers that honestly are jockeying and competing for that missing parent in your life.
Mm.
Because it's the
Wow.
sense that if you had someone that you could rely on, you can trust, that was serving as a leading example, the right example for how you should go about things, somebody that you can call on at any given point of the day, that you felt like you were safe to ask the dumb questions, the be vulnerable in front of, and still feel loved in the process. If you had somebody like that in conjunction alongside your mother, you probably would have less emphasis and less reliance on all these quote unquote influencers that are all in our phone and on our computer screens and our TVs and that sort of thing. But because that's not the case, not only are we feeling the pressure, peer pressure in the school, now it's like when school is no longer in session, that doesn't mean that we stop learning. And where we learn from may not be the right sources. But if there isn't somebody that's helping guard our hearts and our minds and our eyes to see the right things and the right way to go about it, that's what gives us, in a sense, be vulnerable to some of the bad things that we don't want in our lives.
Wow, that's crazy. The influencer is oh my god, it was something I was watching years ago, and they talked about that, and they talked about how like these people, if they learn in these influencers, or I can't get it out, but it was something I saw years ago. They talked about them influencers being the ones that they don't have a dad at home, they go watch this person or they go watch that person, and this person, I can't help but to believe, which I'm gonna get into in another segment. It's a push from a different source, and I'm gonna get into that in another segment because I don't want to jump ahead of myself. But fatherlessness does affect mental health, and I have some sources. So the first one says it is increased risk of mental health disorders. According to Father Absence, Father Deficient, Father Hunger from Psychology Today, children without fathers are disproportionately represented among those with a range of mental health issues. It says they are more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression, or an increased risk of suicide. These effects are often due to feelings of abandonment and low self-esteem that arise from not having a parental figure. Then the second one that kind of tie together behavior and emotional challenges, as noted in the article, and the impact of absent fathers on the mental health of Black boys from the USC Center for Health Journalism. Young men growing up without fathers often face significant behavioral emotional challenges. They are more likely to exhibit aggression, suffer from low self-esteem, and engage in antisocial behaviors. And it's so crazy because when you look back just in school, before I go to the next points, all of the dudes who was always mad, they were always fighting, they were womanized in most cases, they were bullies in a lot of cases, they didn't have fathers. And then it's like you could literally, and looking back, so many kids, you can tell, like you couldn't, of course, as a kid, you couldn't tell then, but you can look back and tell that someone who's been in education, that was in education 6.5 years, I can even tell, like, and you say it and it sounds bad. Y'all don't crucify me, but you're like, they ain't got no daddy. There ain't no way. There's no way, because the way they acting like this, they doing this, and then it's the other extreme too, where they ain't not aggressive. They're extremely, as the old school said, soft. and they're extremely like weak,
Passive.
passive, right? So it's just crazy how everything starts to align, and then it's great because it goes to the next one, which is academic and social struggles. The research from father absence and neglect and long-lasting effects by men's voices. Ireland points out that boys from father absent homes are more likely to drop out of school and have poor academic performance. They also struggle with social adjustments and more likely to have problems with friendships and other relationships. This is interesting stuff. So, and then the other one also talks about substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've dealt with this situation, talk of fatherlessness. How long have you been in this field and have been studying this?
Well, I'll tell you this. I went to school for a number of things, but I didn't have to go to school to understand the impact of not having a present father around.
You went to the school of hard knocks, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Um, my
you
dad
live
was
it.
the same. He didn't
Hmm.
grow up without a father too. So for him to be there and be impactful, I'm sure that does more to him than he probably even realizes. The same with you as someone who didn't have one, and now you're the person who's like the person, you know what I'm saying? The super dad in more ways than one, not just in the house, but also on the different platforms.
Hmm.
So now, based on your extensive economics and political science background, what do you believe are the economic and society and social consequences of fatherlessness in communities?
So it's a very big question. I think you just got to take it one step at a time. Um, if you already are going across life without a sense of who you are, your identity, and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And you're more susceptible to behaviors that can sideline you in terms of economic opportunities, right? That could prevent you from going to higher education, that could get you involved in the criminal justice system, that might curtail some of the opportunities you may have as far as finding a job, to being surrounded by a culture that is um, downplaying the role of men in our family, in our homes, that is preaching, quote unquote, a message that women can do bad all by themselves and they don't need men. That could then play a mental role in terms of um, taking care of yourself and taking care of yourself in a way where you can feel like you can provide for other people, namely your family. Um, there's a number of different ways this impacts you. But I think the biggest thing is when you're not having that sense of a framework on what it is you're here to do, that it's an expectation for you to learn, to get a means to provide for yourself, the expectation that if you have a child, you are to be a father to your child and to provide for him or her, um, preferably in a family with the mother of your children. So you have a family unit you are looking after and you are supporting. Um, it's a number of different things that, from an economic or societal expectation, um, this is where it's like you have more people that are less likely to hold on to jobs,
Mm-hmm.
pursue higher education, where you have women far outnumbering the number of men that are in colleges and then further graduate education. And then on top of that as well, now you have families that are more woman led, more single parent households than it was in history, predating the civil rights movement, for example. And to now, essentially, you have a lot of our young men taking note from one another, that now you start to have a generational legacy for your kids and ongoing, that has less and less expectations for what you can achieve, that becomes a generational cycle that we have to break.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So now let's go into my next segment, which is I challenge that. And in this segment, we kind of challenge things going on just to get to the point of just for the debate of it all. But before we get into that, one thing I do believe is that all men should learn from failure. I believe that. I've always believed that. And, you know, a lot of people try to avoid failure, which I'm going to ask this and maybe I'm reaching. Do you think that that's more of a woman woman's trait to try to avoid failure versus a man? Or is that a
I
reach?
don't. It might be a reach, Izzy, and here's why I say that: because failure doesn't care whether you're man or woman,
You're right. Right,
right?
right.
And I think oftentimes we learn more from our failures than we do our successes. I think that at the same time, depending on the person, a person may be more risk averse to put him or herself out there at the risk of doing something wrong or making a mistake or failing. That's more of the thing that can impact men or women, regardless. But I think it's more so as far as how do you look at risk? How do you look at, going out for what you're looking to do? And just understanding that, you might take on the mentality that failure is a part of the process rather than game over for you.
So with that, let me ask you this. So reflecting on the closure of your multi-million dollar business post-COVID, what were some of the key lessons you learned about resilience and recovery in business?
So I think one of the biggest things is that you recognize that life goes on and you have a choice on how you will proceed when things don't go your way.
Mm.
Because you could sulk in a pity party for an extended period of time. You could pick yourself up and say, hey, listen, I've been blessed with another day to live. Let's take it one step at a time to figure out where do we go from here. Um, there's a number of examples of entrepreneurs that have had tough times, closed down businesses, had experienced failure that turned things around for themselves, started a new venture, went a different direction, commenced a new chapter that actually was more fruitful and successful for them because they took on the lessons they learned from their failures and applied it in a way that helped them further their success than otherwise. Um, but then you also have the opportunity or the choice to make that maybe you say, you know what, enough's enough. I don't want to go through this anymore. Maybe you say, I quit on that pursuit. You do something completely different. You settle for something less than what you're capable of doing. And to be honest with you as well, there's some people that may say, you know what, I don't know if life is even worth living after this. And they may not even survive this altogether when you're thinking about mental health is concerned.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the choice is yours on how best you go about it. It's helpful to have a support system to help you make the best decision on how you go about things going forward. Um, but ultimately, I believe that everyone has a choice on how they will respond when they fail.
Okay. All right. Now you wrote the book Disagree Without Disrespect: How to Respectfully Debate with Those Who Think, Believe, and Vote Differently from You. Now, as this is the challenge section, and in this podcast is to respectfully agree to disagree if needed. So, yeah, why did you write that?
The short answer is I think we've reached a point where, when I was growing up, there's some things you just didn't talk about at the dinner table, like politics, religion, and money. Now we're at a point where not only is it something you have to be really cautious about bringing up, but you're also at risk to have any difference of opinion on any issue with anybody that could lead you to being isolated from loved ones, criticized or cursed out on social media in the comments, or unfriended, unfollowed, swiped left, whatever the case may be, silenced, censored, or canceled just because of a difference of opinion. And the thing is, it's not as if we just now came across disagreements for the first time. That's existed since the time of us being here as far as
Right.
civilization. What's different now is how we navigate these tough conversations and these differences of opinion. And as much as we would espouse and advocate for diversity, I would argue diversity also exists beyond skin deep, beyond what you see. A lot of it is also something you should embody diversity of thought, but a lot of us don't have the framework or way to go about it. And so I wrote this book trying to provide a framework that can be helpful for people so that they can better navigate these type of conversations and they can better protect the importance of having diversity of thought in our living rooms, in our classrooms, and in the boardrooms where we work as well.
So, what is your take on Candace Owens?
What do you want me to talk about?
Why do you think she gets so much hate?
I think part of why she gets a lot of pushback is oftentimes on one end, she's saying some things that a lot of people disagree with, and that a lot of people would be quick to say she doesn't represent all Black people because she's saying something that may run counter to what many other leaders in the Black community would advocate. So it's almost in a sense that if you and I are advocating for something, and then I said, "Oh, actually, Izzy, I disagree with you," and people looking from the outside saying, "But they're on the same team, assumingly because they're Black. Why is one trying to cancel the other person?" Now it's like I'm saying something that's running counter to you. I'm against you in this sense. The only way I can help further advocate what I'm looking to do is to downplay or to censor or to silence or to defame or to slander Candace and what she has to say to give her less credibility and to help bolster you up in the public view as far as public opinion goes. So I think I think a lot of it is the sense that if you have a different point of view and you happen to look alike, then some people may have a mutual vested interest to do whatever he or she can do to silence that person or to delegitimize that person despite having different viewpoint.
I'm gonna say this about her because I've talked about it a few times on the podcast, and I'm gonna move on. But I literally I kept hearing about her for a long time, and so I was like, fine. I said I'm gonna listen to her, and I've listened to her, and I really found very few things I didn't agree with. I was just like, are we listening to the same person? I'm like, maybe I'm missing something. And I actually caught hell for defending her when she went on the Breakfast Club a little while back. And they was trying to drag me in the comments. Somebody tagged me and made a video and was like, show me one video where she's attacking a white person. I said, there are several. You know what I'm saying? It's the list. She dragged Ariana Grande. Ariana Grande is not Black. So, you know what I'm saying? So it was just like, no, she hasn't done that. I'm like, okay, whatever. Y'all just being blinded, and it is what it is. Now, let's move on from that. So, challenge that section. A lot of the issues mentioned earlier are issues that I see from also men who have fathers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would be your response to that to say, well, I have all those problems and I have a dad?
Well, like I said before, Izzy, we all have dads. Now,
in the house, you know what I mean? Like,
I get it, but it's also helpful to clarify, right? It's, the relationship we have with our dads varies by the person, right? And so it may be the case where it's just like, I would venture to say, what was your relationship like with your dad growing up? What did you learn from your dad? Whether explicitly in what he said or did in front of you, or implicitly as far as what he did not do, what he did not say, what he did not involve himself with you on. And so I think it's just as likely you could go down a bad path if your father sets a bad example in the house. So just like you were talking about before, Izzy, you can have someone in the house as a father that is abusive, but he's still in your life. He's still in the house. You can have a father that's passive, doesn't care what you do. You ask him a question, he say, hey, whatever you want to do, I don't care. But he's still present. He's in the house, right? So there's a level of consideration in terms of what kind of a father you had, even if he's in the house.
Okay, just a second. Okay. So now let me ask you this. Society, we talked briefly about society today. And if we look at history, we have to look at a few different things, especially when it comes to television. So Brett Cooper, which I watched her video when she talked about this, and she talked about how she was raised. She wasn't allowed to watch certain shows because of how they portrayed certain characters, especially fathers. And we look at shows like Frank Gallagher from Shameless, Peter Griffin from Family Guy, Homer Simpson from The Simpsons, and the list goes on from animated to real. And they portray these fathers as idiots. Like the oh, go ask your mom, he's a drunk, the dad's a drunk, he fall all over the place, he's immature, he's irresponsible. Do you feel that that's a subtle way for society to try to tear down men?
Of course. The biggest thing I would say is that, the responsibility you have and the messaging you put out is partly because of how you can influence people on a way of thinking about things. So, for example, when I was growing up busy, I wasn't necessarily raised watching Family Guy and The Simpsons. I watched it from time to time, but I watch more of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Mm,
I watched Family Matters. I've watched um, other shows that basically had fathers present and included that helped me better understand, what is it like to be a Carl Winslow
yeah.
or Uncle Phil. And especially in some of those sitcoms and TV shows that I watch, you had characters that didn't have present fathers, that father figures stepped up and provided for people. And so I think that, to your point, yeah, the power of media includes the power to influence people one way or the other to support a certain narrative or message you want people to take away from, which can influence how people perceive things or perceive people. That also influences our culture.
All right, good stuff. Let's go to the next segment, which is the weekly sabbatical. Now, I have to ask you, you are a father of twin daughters. So how has this influenced your how has this influenced your views on parenting within the context of your Christian faith?
Yeah. So I look at it in the sense that my first ministry as a Christian is not so much social media, is not so much the world around me necessarily. My first ministry, first and foremost, is my family.
Yeah.
So how am I covering, supporting, and loving my wife and my kids is more important than any other vocation or ministry position I can take on. Because if anything, people can tell how you are by how you are with the people that are closest to you that are within your stewardship.
Good stuff. I like that. So Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way that they should go, even when they are old, they will not depart from it. So let's go a little bit more depth of faith. And I like how you say, as a father, you lead. And even just how, just from a little bit of this conversation, I can tell you a very stern individual. Whereas we will see today, we're seeing more of that today versus in the past, it was like, or people's assumption of Christian men were just weak, passive, and I just, well, I'm gonna turn the other cheek. And if you actually read the Bible, they still did it in a holy way, but those people were stern, the prophets, even Jesus. I remember reading Luke not too long ago, and I was just like, oh my God, he was letting them have it. When you look at it from a different lens versus from how he was portrayed or how people try to portray him. So have you ever noticed something I always thought was interesting? When they'll say, like, oh, your grandmother's prayers are still, hanging over you. And although I might believe that to an extent, why don't we ever say your grandpa's prayers were still lingering over you? Why we only say, oh, Big Mama was praying the house down? Why didn't Big Papa pray the house down? Why do you think that is or was?
I think it's a great question. The question that comes off my head was I were our grandfathers praying men?
I don't think so.
It's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, like both grandparents can pray for you, but it seems like if it comes off more so that your grandmother is praying more for you than your grandfather, the question becomes, yeah, you know, was my grandfather a praying man? Was my father a praying man?
Yeah,
Because last time I checked, prayer is not exclusive just to women.
right.
And so as a Christian man, like prayer is your relationship with God. It's your ongoing communication with Him. So if we're not known as praying men, then that also sounds like we're not engaged in an ongoing relationship with our Heavenly Father.
Yeah, yeah. So now, as we kind of wind things down today, I would ask you just to pick your brain. How do you think young men can build and maintain strong relationships despite the absence of a father? And then what role do you think these relationships play in their overall mental health?
Yeah. So I think two things is one, take care of what's most close to you as far as your family is concerned. If you are a husband and a father, you take care of your family. You're active, you're present, you're supportive, you're providing. You work on your first ministry to make sure that whatever you might have experienced doesn't pass on to the next generation. Now, I know that can be a tall tale to embark on. In which I would say, second is don't be afraid to seek out help and support for yourself, particularly among other men that you can look up to, that you can learn from continually, because that's part of being a father. It doesn't stop when you're 18. Ideally, you should be a father for somebody until you pass away. So there's still wisdom you can impart to somebody after they turn 18, after they become a husband, after they become a father. So even in the case where that may not be the case for you, seek out ways that you can find strong, non-passive, active men that are fathers and are husbands that are Christ-like, that you can model after, learn from, be mentored by, that can further feed into you to be the type of husband and father that your family needs from you.
All right, good stuff. Great way to end it. So now let's end up with today's question or challenge for the audience. Did you have a father growing up? And obviously, yes or no. And then how did it affect you and how does it affect you now? All right, as we end off today, anything else you want to pub or let the people know? This has been a great conversation, very insightful. And I hope people take a lot. There's a lot of gems that was dropped. Anything else you want to add before you go?
No, it's just been a pleasure talking to you, Izzy. I've written a few books that people might be interested in. Just go on to Amazon and just look up my name, Philip Blackett, PhilipBlackett. If you like to touch base and connect with me, you can go to my website, philipblackett.com, or look me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok for that matter. I'll be there too. Just look up my name, Philip Blackett.
All right. And of course, some of his information will be in the bio for the episode. All right, y'all. That is all we have for today. PSA signing out. Always remember, keep your head up like your neck hurt. Remember who you are. Make your mind up. Don't let it make you. And remember, finally, I love us for real.